Hey everyone, it's Top Chef, and today I want to talk about something the Assassin's Creed community mentions all the time, but very rarely actually breaks down. We've said that we're tired, we even say that the franchise feels exhausted, and we say it doesn't hit the same anymore. But most of the time, that's where the conversation ends. And I think this is part of the problem, because if we as a community can't clearly explain why we feel this way, then nothing ever really changes. The frustration will just keep looping. And from the outside looking in, this is going to sound like noise instead of feedback. So this video isn't about attacking Ubisoft. It's not even about saying that Assassin's Creed is dead. It's about understanding the fatigue properly, because if we as a community can articulate why we feel this way, then maybe the people making these games can understand it too, and with that can actually do something with it. And the best way that I can explain what's happened to Assassin's Creed is this. The franchise is a pressure cooker. Assassin's Creed is the pot itself. The heat is the constant releases, the constant expectation, and the constant evolution, and every game adds a new ingredient to the dish without ever really understanding what's going on. Early on, these ingredients made the dish better, but eventually adding more under constant pressure doesn't improve the dish, and eventually it overcooks. But before we can continue, we have to be honest with ourselves. Yes, some of this fatigue we feel comes from bad games that launched rough, games that missed the mark, games that didn't respect players' time, polish, and expectations. That matters, and we shouldn't pretend otherwise. But here's the difference. In a calm kitchen, one bad ingredient can be corrected. In a pressure cooker, that's already overheating. That bad ingredient dominates the entire dish. That's why certain Assassin's Creed games didn't just disappoint, they left a bad taste that never really faded, because the heat never stopped. At the start of this dish, Assassin's Creed had a clear recipe. The early games laid down strong foundation ingredients: social stealth, dense cities designed for parkour, historical immersion, a clear Assassin versus Templar identity, and characters we had time to live with. There was Altair, Ezio, and Connor. They weren't rushed. They were allowed to simmer. Ezio in particular mattered because we followed him across multiple games. We watched him grow, change, and age. And that time created attachment. The dish worked because the ingredients complemented each other. The heat was present but controlled, and the identity was clear. This is when Assassin's Creed tasted like Assassin's Creed. And now we've reached a turning point in this recipe: Black Flag. And this part is important. Black Flag isn't necessarily a bad ingredient, depending on who you ask. It's a powerful one though. A naval combat, exploration, freedom. As a pirate game, you could argue that it's exceptional, but Black Flag fundamentally changed the flavour of this dish. The fantasy shifted. You weren't primarily an assassin anymore. You were a pirate first, assassin second. And instead of turning the heat down to let a new ingredient integrate, the franchise just kept cooking. And from this point, Ubisoft never slowed down. They just kept adding new ingredients to the pot, and each new game added something else. The co-op systems, deeper RPG mechanics, lore and gear scores, skill trees, dialogue choices, mythological arcs, bigger maps, longer runtimes. Individually, many of these ingredients are good, if not great, but inside a pressure cooker that never cools down, they don't blend, they clash. The stealth fantasy gets drowned out. This historical grounding gives way to spectacle. The identity of this dish becomes unclear, not because the ingredients are bad, but because there are too many of them added too quickly under too much heat, and that is how we spoil a dish. And now let's talk about releases. For years, Ubisoft asked its players to sit down and have a massive meal every single time. 80 to 100 hours again and again and again. There was no time to finish one game before the next one arrived, reflect on stories, let opinions soften, or even build nostalgia. Even good entries didn't get space to breathe. In cooking, the resting matters as much as it does the cooking. But Assassin's Creed never left that stove. And then we have to talk about performance. A rough launch is like serving something undercooked. Once and you can be forgiven. Twice and people start to be cautious. After that, they begin to expect it. And that's when you start getting low reviews. At that point, excitement turns into defensiveness. Players don't approach new releases hungry anymore. They approach them with anticipation of something going wrong. And that mindset is incredibly exhausting. And this is where the fatigue gets a bit more serious. We have to think of like characters as the protein of this dish, and they need time. Instead, Assassin's Creed introduces a new protagonist, rushes through their arc, and moves on before we even get a chance to properly bond with them. And that's not nostalgia talking, that's not players being resistant to change. That's what happens when you keep adding new cuts of meat without ever letting them cook. We're not tired of new characters, we're tired of being rushed past them and never having a chance to grow with them. The lack of true sequels means attachment never gets a chance to deepen. And this is why the community sounds the way it does online. They're not angry, they're not hateful, they're just tired. Because the franchise keeps asking players to adjust, adapt, forgive and reinvest without ever giving us a chance to recover. Now, a dead franchise doesn't cause these debates. A dead franchise doesn't even spark essays and comment wars. A fatigued one does. And that fatigue comes from a place of love. A love of a franchise that we've grown up with, that we're now increasingly frustrated with. This isn't about throwing the dish away. The ingredients aren't ruined. The recipe wasn't wrong. What went wrong is that the heat was never adjusted. Assassin's Creed didn't fail because it stopped trying. It struggled because it never stopped cooking. Every time something didn't land, the response was to add more systems, more scale, more mechanics, more characters, all while the pressure kept building. And when you do that, even good ingredients start reacting badly with each other. Flavors clash, textures break down, and the original taste disappears. That's what overcooking looks like. And now, if Ubisoft wants to bring the flavor back, it's not about adding another ingredient or turning the heat up higher. It's about doing the hardest thing a chef can do in a busy kitchen, lowering the heat, letting the dish rest, giving the ingredients time to settle and interact properly. Give us longer gaps between courses. Have a clearer idea of what the dish is meant to be. Leave the characters in the pot long enough for us to care about them. Because sometimes the smartest thing a chef can do is stop cooking for a moment and let the dish breathe. So, let me ask you this. If we can better understand why the community feels this way, why the pressure cooker was never turned down, and why the dish ended up overcooked, do you think the franchise actually has a chance to recover? Let me know your thoughts.